sentiments as Minister Byers. I'm grateful for my son to have been able to travel to Washington, D.C., and to make it back home safe and sound. I give Yahweh praise for my firstborn, he is just wonderful. Yahweh has blessed my wife and myself with 2 wonderful children that have now increased, becoming families of their own. And I just feel like I am so rich. I honestly feel that I am so wealthy that I understand the wealth that Yahweh shares with us. So let me go ahead and get started with our message on today. Again, I will say that I know this is going to be a lot, so I'm going to move as fast as possible. And again, if you're taking notes and don't get everything you want, again, they will be on the website, so you will definitely be able to get any information in as well. This is a PowerPoint, so I have everything here as well. All right, so looking at the trumpets and the bowls, that will be my real focus today. Although I will show some things and kind of keep moving, it's going to come back again. So you won't see anything one time. And so that's why I'm saying I'm going to be moving, so you will see it, but you will see it again, but in just a different presentation. And hopefully my task is to break each thing down. So if you want to follow along in the scriptures, we're going to be a big part of our focus in Revelation. So we'll start in Revelation chapter 8, and I'll be moving through Revelation 8. However, you will see me, some things are chapter 6, some things chapter 16, some things are Zechariah chapter 14. But however, I'm going to be moving, but most everything you will see more than once scripturally. All right, so, and also, everything is not the whole scripture, so definitely if you want to follow along and see all of the printed words, you may do so. And I'm just going to be pulling out some highlighted information to make my points. All right, so Revelation chapter 8, verse 1, and he opened the 7th seal. There came to be silence in the heavens for about an half hour. And I saw the 7 messengers who stood or stand before Elohim, and to them were given 7 trumpets, verse 2. And so from this point, I'm going to focus now on what I believe is at hand and where we are in time. And so in this way, I'm doing a recap on things that I've been talking about well over 10 years. And for the last, I would say more like 13, 14 years, this has been a mainstay of my messages. And so this will not be your first time hearing this. Some of the images, because I have updated, and I've done something that I haven't done previously, I went out to some places in my research, and this took me some time. I've been working on this since last month. I went out to get some stats to the WHO, which is World Health Organization. I went out to their website, and another that you will see is the Munich, and I think Munich is part of Germany. So I pulled up some stats that will help me in my quest for today. And my quest for today is to help bring understanding to where we are in time. And just for a disclaimer, you don't have to believe everything I say. I've never taught that way. I simply present what I have found, and I can only present to you what I have found as factual coming from the scriptures, as factual coming from historical documentation. And I will always give a summary as to what I feel the conclusion is. Does that mean I'm always right? No. So I just wanted to give that disclaimer. Just because I said it or Rabbi said it doesn't make it absolute. But all I am doing is sharing my studies. I am a student of the Torah. If there's nothing else you can call me, I am a student of the Torah. So everything I present to you is scripturally based, along with witnesses that I find in history or historical documentations or current events. All right, so Yahweh's judgment of 1/3, and this is what we will find as we look at Revelation and the 7 trumpets. Now, make sure you differentiate. There are 7 trumpets, and there are 7 bowls. There are 7 seals. The difference between the 7 trumpets and the 7 bowls, 7 trumpets are the warnings. This is what I have surmised or found as my conclusion as I have studied this over the years. The bowls are the full or fuller measure applied. So the trumpets will carry some measure of what it's speaking of as a warning. It's a trumpet. Even though it's happening, it's a trumpet. It's a warning. But when the bowls are then applied, which is Revelation chapter 15 and 16, then it is the application and definitely a fuller measure. All right, so since what's on top is the bowls, I will go with that first. We have the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, and the final 7th bowl. First bowl, and I'm just going to give kind of categoric summations and go through it a little bit more, although my focus will be more on the trumpets and also bring in some of the bowls as well. The first one is sores on men with the mark. Second one represents sea of blood, and all will die. Number 3, the third bowl will be poured out on rivers and bodies of water, which will turn to blood. That will represent death whether or not death occurred, but remember, we're seeing signs. The fourth one is the sun. The sun will be extremely hot. And it speaks concerning, when it gets to its magnitude, burning up vegetation, men will die, so on. Number 5 will be the sun is also struck and it becomes dark, and the kingdom of the beast is now being represented. Very grand. Number 6, the sixth bowl poured out on the earth will be such a drought that the Euphrates River will begin to dry up. And the 7th says, this bowl is poured out into the air, and the quote is, it is done. What is done? Let me just give that part right there. That's the 7th trumpet and the 7th bowl, and it is done. The wrath of Yahweh is now done, have been poured out onto the earth. Not that it's finished, that it has now been poured out. And you have to remember that this day has been coming since the garden, actually. Then we get to the Exodus of Israel. Well, let me go back before that. We have the flood of 1656, the flood of Noah, Yahweh's wrath poured upon the earth. And again, we have this time coming out of Egypt, his wrath poured out on Pharaoh and his kingdom. Now, this one is all of the nations rather than a concentrated country, but it is all of the nations, because he is bringing out his people, Israel. And so those are the major applications. And so now let's go to the bottom row, which are the trumpets. Trumpet judgments, and I know it's a little difficult to see from your vantage point, but just kind of go with the images. I'll read it out to you again. The first trumpet represents burning of the trees and grass. And this is the third judgment of thirds. 1/3 of the earth, 1/3 of the trees, 1/3 of the vegetation, 1/3 of the animals, 1/3 of the water, 1/3 of mankind. Okay? So if you can think of this, this is compared to coming out of Egypt, the wrath that was poured out on Egypt. Now this is to 1/3 of mankind. All right, so 1/3 of the mountains will be on fire. 1/3 of the earth water will be turned bitter, which is called wormwood. That's number 3. Number 4, the sun will be struck. 1/3 of the sun and the stars of the illuminations of the heavens will be cut off. Number 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Demonic forces from the time of Noah will be set free. These are they who were kept for that hour and for that moment and that day and that month. And so these who were locked away for a vast amount of time since the days of Noah are released to bring torture on the earth for a prescribed amount of time. That is number 5. Number 6, the Euphrates River, once again, notice how they do correlate with the bowls. Bowls, number 6, correlates with trumpet number 7. The Euphrates River will be dried up to make a highway for the east to come and to attack Israel in the mountains of Israel. And number 7, the last trumpet, the mysteries of God now finished. In other words, Yahweh, Yahshua, will now begin to reveal certain things that have been hidden for a time that was to be concluded. And so here we go into the trumpets. Revelation chapter 8, verse 7, the first messenger sounded hail and fire mixed with blood, and a third of the trees were burnt up, and all the green grass was burned up. And so as I move through these, I will let you know which ones that I have seen applied, and my hope is that you may agree. But you don't have to take my word for it. I'm going to show you some of my research, although I'm very, very, very limited on a lot of the things I could have shown you, because like I tried to already tell you that I know this is large, but it's a lot of images. So I'm going to be moving through, and these are things that I find to witness what I am finding. I find that trumpet number 1 has begun and has not stopped. And so what you are looking at is an image overseas in the European nations where it has blazing fire. You see trees. Hopefully you can see the images there. Look at the smoke. Also notice that the sun is also cut off. If this was in your neighborhood, somewhat in your city or township, the sun would be cut off from you. You would not be able to see with such a great smoke going up and fire. Remember, the smoke that is supposed to go up is the burnt offering that ascends, representing Yeshua. But because of our disobedience, this is what we're getting in the trumpets that are warning us. Extreme weather, this one, and I grouped some of them because, like I said, I want to be able to move as fast as possible, but still get these images to you. On the upper left-hand side, if you can see, these are houses. I know it looks like maybe a mudded street with some stones down, but those are rooftops. Those are houses where you should be able to park your car and drive up to your garage and so on and get out and go into your home. On the top right-hand side, here is a closer look at Euphrates over in Iraq, Iran, on that side. This is dried up riverbed that has, there's still water that's a little further out, but this image is showing the ground. Showing the ground. Remember that was one of the trumpets as well. Everything I'm showing you proof of these trumpets, okay? And so, so far we're at trumpet 1, but these are just, kind of going throughout the different trumpets. The next one on your lower left, you see a river down below, but up top is a mountainous plain, or a, not a tundra, but well, let's just go with plain. I'm forgetting my geography stuff, but you can see that there's a frozen river that feeds into a river down below. And look how cold it is. It is frozen. And to our right, we get to the place where we're kind of used to this, you know, if you are out in New York, Washington, or places that get a lot of snow. This is what I grew up with. So I would call that norm. But one of the trumpets is speaking concerning the weather, and that's trumpet 1. The weather is extreme. And of course, I've given my own little titles to the extreme weather. But we have already read it where it says hail, blood, and fire, right? So we got to recognize what we're seeing when we're seeing it. So this is my job, is to sound the alarm that now is the time for us to walk a righteous life, because based on my studies, we are the generations that will not pass before all of this is completed. Remember, it is done. Okay? So that's the 70th year. It is done. Not that it's over. It's that the 7th trumpet has now sounded. The 7th bowl has now been applied. It has been done, and there will be a lot of suffering behind it. Here is another vehicle looking at it closer. And if I'm remembering correct, this one is over in Australia, looking at a car parked near a water outlet, body of water, and it is extremely cold. So remember, trumpet 1 is extreme weather. You're getting extreme heat, extreme cold. And so as we continue, here is some of my proof that I offer you so that you understand that I'm not just speaking these things without complete merit. But I have done a quantitative analysis, and so I'm looking around the world, pulling up information, and here is some of the information that I have acquired. And the top line is a website if you care to go out and check this out for any reason. Like I said, don't take my word for it. Always check. Go out and do some research. This article is from January 17th, 2013, and the writer or author is Janet Larson. And the title is Global Gain or Grain Stocks Drop Dangerously Low as of 2012. Consumption exceeds production. Now, let me just bring that out a little bit. Grain stock. Now, this is on a worldwide platform. This is not just the United States, okay? Grain. Food, what we eat, vegetation, the part that we eat, as well as the animals to survive, has dropped dangerously low. Why am I bringing in 2012? Remember, I have been speaking and teaching about a 7-year period of which the 7 trumpets will begin and conclude with both the 7 trumpets and the 7 bowls. In other words, you're going to get 3.5 years of one category, 3.5 years of it more intensely. So I don't want to say the 7 trumpets are 3.5 years. That would be wrong. because of everything. I didn't know, let's go back 10 years. I didn't know how to approach this. But as we have entered into it, I'm learning. I thought at one point, trumpet 1 would happen, it's over. And then we go into trumpet 2, trumpet 3, all the way to trumpet 7. Bowl 1, bowl 2, 3, bowl 7. But that's not what I'm seeing. So what I am seeing is going straight through. We're still under trumpet 1. We're still under trumpet 2. I believe we're under trumpet all the way to number 7. I don't believe that 6. I don't believe that trumpet 7 has begun yet. And some of you may remember that I even assigned a monthly period to this, which is quite easy. I don't want to seem like I'm such a brainiac. I just know, what Yahweh's doing. It's not like that. What he tells us, we have. It belongs to us and our children forever. And so what he told us is, he said, trumpet 1 is 5 months. You give me that kind of a number, I know that the next, I said trumpet 1. Woe, number 1. There's 3 woes. These are all in different parts. The final 3.5 year period is entered into what we call the woes, W-O-E. Rabbi 2 called it watch out on earth. So these things are happening. And so as we go back to 2011, this is where I have seen the measure begin. And so now to kind of bring in the rest of the information, the world products are produced 2,241 million tons of grain in 2012. It is actually down 75 million tons, or 3%, from the record harvest of 2011. The drop was largely because of drought that devastated several major crops. Continuing with the quantitative measuring, again, this is some of the words that I went out to find proof of what I've been saying. So it's not just from me, but it's from the world that have been keeping up with information, quantitative measuring, I call it, worldwide, or they would call it data consumption. All right, the United States is by far the world's largest grain exporter. Its share of the world's market is shrinking, however. The net 49 million tons of grain that the United States shipped out in 2012 was its smallest outflow since 1971. The United States corn exports of 22 million tons were less than half the quantity of 5 years prior, and just slightly larger than the outflows from each of its South American competitors, which is Argentina and Brazil. And so what does that look like? So let's look at an image now. You would be able to see this, maybe not from your vantage point, all of the numbers, but we have on the left side from 0 to 140 days. Okay, so these are your days. And on the bottom, we have the years going from 1960 to 2012. Keep in mind, I said where this probably have started was 2011. So right after 2011, we're seeing the effects of 2011's winter. All right, so that is what, 52 years? 40, yes, 52 years. So looking at the world supply of food. Now, I want to bring something into mind. Remember, why did they go into Egypt? Because their supplies had dwindled, right? So all of Israel was about to die out because of their consumption was more than their grain intake or harvest. And so they knew if we don't do something right away, we're going to die because we're eating more than we're bringing in. And so that's just easy understanding that if you eat more than you harvest, you're going to run out at some point, right? Okay, we're talking world market. We're not talking about your supermarket. We're talking world market where they have grain and stuff for life. All right. If you can see, our first measure is close to 100, which is like 90. So it's 90 days worth of food, 1960. So they was good. They knew that they were, they were moving pretty good. But it began to drop since 1960 into 1970. It began to rise back up and then fall down again, 1980s. Oh, look, 1980s is skyrocketed. We had about 130 days worth of goods or food in their stock markets. And this is how the nations buy and sell to each other. Remember, we have on one side of the earth, you have summer, you have your harvest. They go into their winter. On the other side of the earth, they go into their summer. They have their harvest. So as we share, when we go to the store, usually for the most part, unless you're in Venezuela and places like that, that is seeing a difference right now, you usually have things that are only in the wintertime. You have things still on the market that you don't have growing in your gardens because you're in your wintertime. But you're able to purchase from other nations to keep you going until your harvest comes, and then likewise. And so in the 1980s, or just about the 1980s, we were really good, and then the 1990s began to slump down again, going below 100 days of food, and then 2000. And look what happened in 2000, or close to, the end of the 1990s. We began to really go into a slump. 2010, 2012, look where we are. We are less than 80 days, approaching 60 days worth of grain. Remember Pharaoh when he said, build houses that we may put food in our stock. And remember, Joseph was the one who came up with what to do at that time. You would take taxes. You would take from all those who are growing their food, and you would then own their land. So Pharaoh was like, yeah, we can do this. And so they would give their land to Pharaoh for grain. So they had to go to Pharaoh in those final days in order to live. And so they were happy to do it, but once they realized that Pharaoh now owns our land, taxes have a purpose. Yeshua never fought against taxes. Matter of fact, he said, go get the fish and get the coins out of his mouth. Another topic, I better walk away from that one. But I want to continue to look at gains and losses. So now we're going from 1980 to 2013. Again, your days on your left side, on your right side, we're looking at our years. And so This is actually events, not days, I'm sorry, events where there were direct impact on our food, harvest, and consumption. Supply equals demand, right? The more you have, the less you can charge for it. The less you have, the more you're going to charge, because more people want what you have. In other words, supply and demand. If there's only 10 items and you have 20 people who want those 10 items, the price go up. If you have 40 items and you have 20 people who want those 40 items, the prices go down. Okay? All right, supply and demand. Big market. Because sometimes they do that just to bring about, higher increased prices. All right, but now, just staying with what's here, we have events that took place in certain years, such as tornadoes, fires, earthquakes, disease. All of these things create a loss in revenue or economy. In other words, just staying with some of today's lingo so that we can see how it works. So with our economy being affected by what we grow, remember our farmers, they're the ones who keep us fed, our farmers, right? And so if they have a good year, we have a lot of supply. But if they have a bad year, if it's been devastating with all of what they would term as natural events, no, there is no natural events. This is Yahweh who allows things to happen, or he stops it from happening. And so these losses, if you can see from our right-hand side, we have 200, and it's still even fuzzy here, about 280 events going up to about over 1,000 events that affect these changes. You got 1,000 at that top line, 200 and something at the bottom line. And from 1980, from the left to 2013, all the way to your extreme right. All right, if you notice, just looking at the wave going up, 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 that's an increase of loss. World events that cause the loss of grain. Whether it was fire, drought, hurricanes came through a farm area, whatever the event they've been recording, and this is some of the information that I've found. I've never been out to this site before. This is Munich. Again, this one is going back to 1950. Yes, 1950. It almost looked like 18, but 1950 through 2013. And this measure is measuring not only food loss, but death that also occurred in these, as they would call it, natural events or natural disasters. I'm going to call it Yahweh's wrath, because let's not forget, we've been under the 4 horsemen since Yeshua was here. So each of those horsemen, death, disease, war, that's all I can think of at the moment. I know I'm leaving out one. But each of these, famine, thank you. Each of these are the horsemen that are claiming lives. All right? So Now we're not only under the horsemen, but now under the trumpets and the bowls. And so you be the judge. So on our left side, we can see a gradual increase, then decrease, increase, decrease, so on, so on. But look, when you get to 2000, let's go to 2011, around that side. And that's right here. There's a spike. And then it comes back down, and then another spike. And this is to 2013. And so just looking at the visuals, what we're looking at is, this one is U.S. disasters. With $1 billion in damage and loss. Farm area, food, corporations, and at least to get on this scale, it had to be at least 50 fatalities in that particular year, at least. So you can see that's a lot of deaths. Although it didn't give us total numbers, that's not what they're going for. At least to get on here, it has to be at least 50 fatalities. So you can see that there was a lot of fatalities just by looking at the graph, and billions, and each number as it goes up. The first one is, I think that's 0 to all the way up to 16. So 0 to $16 billion per event. And so that's the key for that. Let's look at it differently. Again, still looking at world loss on a world view. And again, this is Munich. And their website. You can go out and get this information. And so what you're looking at is the same information, just about, but in a different graph. And so this graph represents let's look at the green. Hurricanes, severe storms, typhoons around the world. So every place that you see the green dots, these are different parts of the world. And one thing that you should notice, that there's a lot in the United States. There's a lot of green in the United States. And these are severe storms that have been record-producing storms. And it even have dates and where they occurred. You also have South America in the middle, starting in the middle here. You have Africa. You have some, not quite on the level of the U.S., but then into the European nations, different areas, on over to Japan and all of that to your extreme right. And so, again, these are extreme weathers. Remember, we saw the cars, we saw the frozen tundra, we saw the floods. Okay, so this is what we're talking about now in the green. So in the orange, we have drought. Look at California. Heavy. That's 2014. And some we have Brazil down below, and we have salted throughout South America. But look at the other nations compared to United States. And again, we're looking at the kind of orange color. And Africa, not as much as the U.S., South America, but then you're going into the European nations, and you see it salted throughout. You have Japan and the different islands over there. And this is representing Japan from February 7th through 16th. And so that area was hit pretty heavy. And so going from there, look at the red. The red is now earthquakes. And you can see Canada area, you can see red in the United States or North America, South America. Look at Africa. You don't see a whole lot. I see one down in, I think that would be Zimbabwe, South Africa. And then going to the European nations, you have Italy and Spain. You have Europe, just Europe. You have China, Japan, all of those different areas. And that's through August 3rd with those earthquakes. One more, which is kind of a teal or a bluish. Those are floods. Look at the U.S., look at South America, look at Africa, look at the European nations, and we see a lot of floods. And the total for 2014 was 980 recorded disasters. 980 recorded major. We're not talking about just the rain. We're talking about flood stuff that just, the water was still standing and people died and people were sitting on the roofs, and all of these variables are in this. 2015, still looking at a overview. We went from 980 recorded disaster events to this one, 2015, 1,060 recorded events. So now, can you see in your mind, picture those graphs as they were going up? And remember, I said that these graphs, since 2011, would have started spiking, and that's what we've seen. Let's look at the scripture on this. Next, we're going to kind of look at mass death. But here's the scripture, Hosea, chapter 4, verse 3. Therefore the land mourns, and everyone living there languish, undergo hardship. With the beasts of the field and the birds of the heavens and the fish of the sea are taken away. Now, for those of you who are familiar with the rapture theory, that there is no scripture to verify that, this tells you who's taken away. And it says here, the beast of the field, the birds, and the fish of the sea are taken away. Now they're talking about being taken up, raptured out. This doesn't agree with that theory. Going back to 2011, when I started recording these myself as in anticipation of the trumpets starting, this is recorded as of January 6, 2011. and it's going to go out. I have updated, so those of you who do remember this, this is now updated to 2017, present time. So dead birds begin immediately falling from the sky, 2011. Millions of fish and crabs washed up on shore. And then 2012, there were 465 known mass death events in 67 countries. Now, when we look at these numbers, these are not deaths, 465 deaths. No, species with hundreds, and in some cases, thousands, and in some cases, millions of death of one species. Now let's use that number. 465 different species in 67 countries. And during that time, I remember the news trying to explain it away, and I said at that time, no, this is the wrath of Yahweh. Hosea 4:13 is now being applied. But on the news, they were like, storm happened and birds, died, or people set off firecrackers and birds died, and the airplanes went up and scared the birds, and the fish died, but read it. I mean, I only gave you one scripture, but Hosea chapter 4 verse 3 is now being applied. Trumpet 1. So for 2013, there were 798 mass deaths in 93 different countries. 2014, 304 mass deaths in 58 countries. 2015, 105 known mass deaths in 34 different countries. And due to not able to get that information on, I didn't do 2016. I went straight to 2017 just so I can make it current. And this was really something here. As of March 2017 of this year, 302 known different species mass death events in 64 countries in a 3-month period of time. Will be interesting to see what this year concludes. Messenger 2, or the second trumpet, what looked like a great mountain burning with fire was thrown into the sea. A third of the sea became blood. A third of the living creatures in the sea died. 1/3 of the ships were destroyed. One of the things that I don't have here, I wasn't able to capture it or cut and paste it. It wouldn't allow me to get which was the ships. One thing, ships are large, they carry things, and ship is not only just a boat or a large boat, but it's also airplanes. And so what I found was, and I never heard this, airplanes being brought down out of the sky because of hail. Another one was locusts. There were so many locusts that it brought down airplanes. But there was hail in the sky, and it brought down a plane here in the U.S., Daytona Beach area, at the airport, of course. But it was an emergency landing because of the hail had damaged the front. It was hitting so hard, it looked like bullets riddled all of the nose of it and cracked the windshield, the front windshield. You know that's a problem because that's the pilot in there, and if you knock out the pilot on that particular plane, it was 130 people. So they had an emergency. They had to come down. But after looking at that, I also saw, it wasn't from the hail, but it was the windstorm. I saw planes that was just bundled up like toys. A lot of different planes had they were on the ground, but they were twisted metal because of the windstorm. And so I believe even in that, even the ships are being destroyed. It's not all at one time. It's over a period of time. Each year, different things happen. Some of you may also remember the carnival. I think this goes back 2, maybe 3 years ago. There was a carnival that turned on its side, and a lot of people died in that. And they held the captain responsible for what was going on. And I think it was a cruise ship. Yes, Carnival cruise ship. So, I mean, these things are happening. That's not the only one. There's been more. Some of you also may remember the airplane that they came down in the Hudson. They even made a movie about that. He had to do an emergency landing, and he landed in the Hudson River. So things are happening. And so let's look at mountains being cast into the sea. There's more than one application to that. But here is a mountain, and we would call it what? Volcano, right? And so what do we see? Fire and smoke. Fire and smoke. We're on the second trumpet. Fire and smoke. And notice that the lightning that was happening there. Here is another viewpoint. Again, this one is over in Europe, where there is a volcano happening, and you can see all of the fire, the lava that is coming down, and the lights that you see down at the bottom are houses. This is residential area. These are lives. These are people that this is happening to. Most of the time when these things are about to happen, you have time based on the sound and the smoke and the spewing of the lava to get out and try your best to get to higher ground. But sometimes things like this happen and you lose homes and businesses, and this is just a lot. Let's bring it home, kind of look 2012 here in the United States. Here's a recorded document. All of these dots, yellow and brown dots that you see, are live wildfires. Wildfires. And some of you may remember in 2011, they couldn't get one out before another one started. It was so extremely hot that just wooded areas would just combust, and campsites, people like fires and things, just the wind carry it and just things happen. So here again, the extreme weather. Looking at the west coast side, it's just really littered with fire. Look at the east coast. Third messenger sounded. And what is the third trumpet? The third trumpet is wormwood. And a great star fell from heaven, burning like a torch. It fell on a third of the rivers, on the fountains of water. And the name of the star is called wormwood. and a third of the waters became wormwood, and many men died from the waters because they were made bitter. So right there, Talmudim, you should be thinking about the waters being made bitter in the wilderness, where Moshe threw the golden ark, and another time tree bark and stuff, and the water was made bitter, and they were made to drink it, which in turn, if they were guilty, then a sign would be seen and they were told to kill them off. This is when the priesthood was established as the guardians of the Torah. And so this is Revelation chapter 8, verse 10 through 11. Well, in 2013, I think we saw the witness to trumpet number 3. This is JB 101. In Russia, a meteor lit up the sky, and this was daytime, and this is actual footage. And approximately 1,500 injuries happened when this came down across the sky. Now it went into a body of water. They were able to find it sometime after. I searched to see where did it land during that time, 2013, 2014, but it wasn't until later on they were able to verify that it was indeed landed, it had indeed landed in the earth. Trumpet number 4 sounded. A third of the sun, the moon, the stars was struck and were darkened, and a third of the day did not shine. Kind of put a notation right there. Did not shine. And likewise the night. And I looked, and I heard an eagle flying in mid-heaven, crying with a loud voice, "Woe, woe, woe to those dwelling upon the earth." Revelation chapter 8, verses 12 and 13. And so what is this? This is the final 3.5-year period of which there's greater devastation than the devastation of the first 3.5-year period. And so, as we continue, that's the 4th trumpet, and looking at the 7-year period, 3.5 years, that equals 7. This is known scripturally as the time of Jacob's distress, or Yaakov's trouble, or known to a lot of people as the tribulation period. The first, again, is a 3.5-year period. The second, which is also known as the Great Tribulation, the second half, is also a 3.5-year period. And I would tell you right away, this is where the 7th and final trumpet occurs after the 7-year period. The 7th-year period, then the 7th trumpet, the seventh bowl, or from what I have surmised, is the first is the 7 trumpets and the warnings, but salted through all the way to 7-year period. That's the first 3.5-year period. But the final 3.5-year period are the bowl applications, which are a greater application than what was produced in the 7 trumpets. This is also known as the day of Yahweh. So whenever you read the day of Yahweh, this is what it's talking about. The scripture says, I have a day of revenge in my heart. And that was Yeshua before he had come, spoken of as prophecy. Let's look at Matthew chapter 24, verse 29 through 30. And immediately after the distress of those days, the sun shall be darkened, and the moon shall not give its light, and the stars shall fall from the heavens, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. And then the signs of the Son of Adam shall appear in the heavens, and then all the tribes of the earth shall mourn, and they shall see the Son of Adam coming on the clouds and of the heavens with power and much esteem. And he shall send his messengers with a great sound of a trumpet, and they shall gather together his chosen ones from the 4 winds, from one end of the heavens to the other. Now that really says everything we need. When will these things be? Remember they asked Yeshua that, right? He said, see those stones, not one shall be upon them. Okay, so here later on, that's still chapter 24, starting at verse 1. But we're at 29:31. So we're well into the conversation already. So he's explaining. And so there's no greater person that I can go to get understanding about how it will look during the 7th trumpet. Remember I said I believe we have already entered into number 6, but we're still dealing with numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And when 7 happen, 6 will end. And I told you before, if you give me 2 numbers, I can come up with the 3rd. Well, he gave us, and the first woe has ended. And it says 5 months. Okay, so I understand. That's the 5th trumpet. So that's a 5-month period. Now, whether you put that on the front or the end, I don't know. That's a wait and see for me. The events of the time. But then he says, and the 2 witnesses are in this as well. They have 1,260 days. Not 1,261. 1,260 days they will be cut off. They will die. Those who are in Israel will see them laying in the street for 3.5, I don't have this on there, for 3.5 days, and they will be called up to heaven. They will rise. People will witness. So these are things that will become factual. When it happens, it will be proven that this is the time. So when they rise, but guess what? Hasatan, he gets 1,260 days as well. So that means he covered the days that they have, plus he get a 30 days more than them. So that means he defeat them, and they are the ones who died at his hand. And so he kills them, the 2 witnesses, and he has only 30 more days. So that tells me right there that if nothing else, when the 7-year period has ended, he has a 30-day period somewhere in there, whether it's just inside the 7 or outside of the 7. In addition, we know it's 30 days. So I don't have to scratch my head about that. I know when his time has ended. And I know from that point, Yeshua is the 7th trumpet. And he goes on from there. And so, but it speaks concerning some signs. So this is on the inside of, I believe, the final 3.5-year period of the 7-year period, if you understand that. The final 3.5-year period. And it says, and then the sign of the Son of Adam shall appear, and we shall see the Son of Adam coming on the clouds. I don't think we had this yet. I believe this is still yet to come. And this one should ring holy days for you. And he shall send his messengers with a great sound of a trumpet to do what? To gather together the chosen ones. So when will we be gathered? After the sign of Yeshua has been shown in the earth. So when we see the earth go dark and we see a light, a lot of things I don't have here in the script. I mean, these are scriptures that I'm giving you. We will see, the scripture says, and all shall see the sign of the sun coming. There's nothing that says we will see the sun. It says we will see the sign of the sun. But guess who takes advantage of that? Hasatan. Didn't you see my sign? So then we are taken, set aside for a time. Years coming up to this period of time, I thought that we would be there for a 3.5-year period. And we would be at a place for that whole period of time. That has not happened. But what I have seen is that we were at a place. I remember 2015 being at Sukkot, and we couldn't even go outside. We were locked in. And there was a lot of stuff going on in the earth. There was a breakout in Jerusalem that they just started knifing people and coming into Israel in a very crazy way. And these are things that I found, and as I was doing the research, we were reined in, if some of you remember. We could not go out for 5 days straight. And when we got out, there were roads that were flooded. I even seen at some of the people's Sukkots that there were one of our European brothers, their camp. He posted a tree came down on their camper. And praise Yahweh, he also gave a praise report. None of us died in that. But they were flooded out during the same time. A lot of people were flooded out. And some people, I remember, I know it was Bob Mason. He said we had to cut our Sukkot short. It was either that or die out there. He said we chose life. So to cut our Sukkot, we had to think wisely and say, okay, we got to go home where we can come out of the rain. But we were all in this particular year. We were all in one big house. And that don't happen too often. A lot of times we are in little smaller places and you know, we have to walk to where, you know, our central place. But this particular year, and it was almost that we could have ended up at Julipa, I know I'm not saying that correct, at a beach, and we got there and was like, whoa, this is going to be nice. And we, you know, we just fell in love with that place, and we was like, yeah, this will work. And for some reason, it was like, no. Although we were happy, I was just uneasy. And I said, after I saw, you know, it was a chance we may choose that particular place, I'm like, I don't think we need to be near the water right now. I don't think we need to be that close, because we were literally on the beach. Our housing, you just walk across the street, you're on the beach. And I'm like, I don't think we need to be that close. And so we chose another place that was able to house all of us. And we were inside 5 days. We got out. We saw some of the devastation that happened just 10 miles away from us, going over the South Carolina border. And I'm just trying to give you some things that I remember. I think this was one of those points where we were inside. And I believe that satisfied part of that time, and I think each year does that. But anyway, that's JB 101. I don't have to be right. Some of you may also remember this, and years coming up to that point. I taught on it before it happened. Now it's behind us. There were some signs in the heavens, 4 blood moons, and in the middle of those 4 blood moons were a dark sun. And so the language that we use today through science is lunar eclipse, blood moons, solar eclipse, which also reminds me that we are coming into another sign, I believe, in a few days. On August 21st, there is going to be something very particular about this solar eclipse. Number one, the only country that will have a good visual is the United States. So it will go from the west coast to the east coast.